Redditors who have actually been to your 10-year high school reunion, what is the biggest transformation you've seen someone make in that 10 years? One girl who sat next to me in English class in junior and senior year. Thick Coke bottle glasses, a bird's nest of thick curly hair. She was always very nice and very smart, but super quiet and introverted. I was an extroverted, outgoing jackass, so I used to ask her to read parts when we studied Shakespeare. Invited her into my group for group projects and made her take speaking roles. That kind of thing. She was never really comfortable talking about herself and we never hung out outside of class. So I left school not knowing much about her except that she was smart, quick to grin at a joke, and had strong feelings about the crucible. 10 years later, this gorgeous woman shows up to our reunion. Smoking hot redhead, sparkling blue eyes, built like a brick house. That goofy teenage grin had turned into a confident, knowing smile. She knew how to dress and make herself up to emphasize her assets and minimize her flaws. She was jaw-droppingly stunning. We talked for a good hour. She was just a late bloomer. I apologized for always volunteering her for public speaking and she said it was one of the things that made her start to confront her shyness. She ended up going to an Ivy League school and became a journalist. Of all things. We still chat from time to time. Edit. No, we didn't bang. I was happily engaged by my 10-year reunion and well settled into my career. She lived in Africa on assignment from a wire service. We were in very different places in our lives and I was and am happy to count her as a friend. Edit 2. Bricket house. Slang for a stacked hourglass figure on a woman. Skinny nerdy guy got busted for selling a couple $100,000 worth of Adobe software in college and spent 15 months in prison. He came out super buff. The kid who was stealing motorcycles and selling them for parts is now a police officer. He was never accused or convicted of course, but I knew that for a fact. Let's hope people sometimes do change. On the flip side, I know someone who hasn't aged since high school. No extra fat, no wobbles, no grey hair, nothing. Even his voice is the same at 30 as it was at 14. I'm pretty sure he's a vampire. Back in high school we had a kid who has Asperger's and was a little weird. He was, however, amazing at the yo-yo, having picked one up during middle school when we had that yo-yo trick assembly. After everyone else had stopped walking the dog in 8th grade, this guy was doing more and more elaborate tricks every day during lunch. He was bullied and teased but he continued doing what he loved. So, at our 10-year reunion, people from every strata of high school popularity was there. Including this guy. He was his same old self, but more confident. I asked him if he still yo-yos, and he busted out his custom-made titanium yo-yo that he said he made on a CNC lathe. He then starts to do some tricks and a large crowd gathered around. It was quite the show. He had gotten very good. When he finished, people clapped and cheered, and even the jockeys dudes from back in the day fist bumped him and told him how badass he was. So I guess the biggest transformation was everyone else. Nobody teased him for being who he was anymore. They now admired him for being so passionate about something. My boyfriend went to his 10-year over the weekend. Saw this overly made up, rather unattractive woman he didn't know. Turned out to be one of his old football buddies. So, I'd say that was a very big transformation. Nobody changed at all. I left Ireland 3 days after my leaving cert, and happened to move back a month before the reunion party. I hadn't seen a single person in the 10 intervening years, and everyone was basically the exact same person as they had been in school. Better dressed, more confident, less awkward, but essentially the exact same people. I had been dreading it, because I was never a popular kid in school, but it actually felt wonderful to be among those people again. After high school, you never really get to know anyone that well again. Add that to me having spent 10 years being an immigrant in various places, and that made reconnecting with these people extra sweet. All of the people with massive chips on their shoulders, they didn't show up. So the only people who were there were the ones who were as excited as I was. There was one kid who changed massively, but he didn't come to the reunion. In school, he was the most dyslexic kid, worst at math, bottom of every class. His only love was making homemade bombs on his farm and blowing up with them. He went to a college in Cornwall or Wales or something that specialized in mining. because he figured that way he could work with explosives. So fast forward almost 10 years, and I am finally getting my bachelor's degree. I took a bit longer than most people do, but I had just got the results from my last few exams and I had finally passed. I was basking in that elation when my phone rang, and it's this guy. He just got his PhD for building a ducking robot that goes into mines and fires ducking lasers everywhere to make a 3D scan of the mine without endangering any humans. He built a robot with lasers on it and had a PhD. Way to take the wind out of my sails, James. Twin sisters. The good one, straight A student and a perfect angel, is now 90 pounds soaking wet and just finished her 4th stint in rehab for drugs. The one who was a troublemaker and constantly in trouble, even arrested a few times for drugs and shoplifting while in high school, is a doctor with a family. Edit. I'm gonna start referring to the angel that went bad as the tall one and wild one that went good as the short one. It'll make things less confusing for now on. I don't wanna use their names and I keep almost doing it. It's only been 5 years since I graduated and one of the girls in my class is a freaking rocket engineer, working for NASA. Like what? She used to cry about that douche bag she was dating. We did yoga in pay and talked about stupid high school girl things. And to think if I'd actually seriously applied myself it would have been possible for me too. Good on her. We didn't have a 10-year but we did have a 22-year. The year we all turned 40. It was so much fun. We rented the summer camp we all went to growing up for the whole weekend. People brought their kids. We got wasted and told stories all night. We were all older and fatter, but nobody had changed a bit. 10-year reunions suck for homeschoolers. I should call my sister. I was friendly with this guy freshman sophomore year, I think. He was super quiet, shy, incredibly studious, chubby kid. Even some teachers would be like, lighten up, relax. He came out of his shell senior year and we kind of stopped being friends because he was hanging out with the cool kids and having parties where people could drink, etc. And I was super square and uninterested. So at my reunion, he was this X20. He is now a hotshot kind of guy in DC working for a strategies company. Just googled it. No idea what they do. Anyway, at the reunion he was mostly okay until he chugged a ton of beers. Some folks had left, but the rest of left at the reunion had gathered around while he picked up a yearbook. He proceeded to it on every person in our year whether they were there to defend themselves or not. This was a super uncool kid freshman year, who nobody really disliked or made fun of, actually, just bashing everyone for weight, being weird, being uncool, being too cool, etc. My boyfriend was with me. He did not go to HS with me and was so uncomfortable the entire time. One of my neighbors growing up was that super motivated type A do everything types. Co-valedictorian, captain of the hockey team, gifted musician, just always working. 10-year reunion, went just how we all expected. Full ride to Yale, Harvard MBA, 6-figure Wall Street job, gorgeous fiance, and he seemed utterly miserable. 10 years later, 20th reunion, he got sick of it all, quit his job, sold his house, got divorced, and got out of town. He now owns a pig farm in upstate New York, spends his days working the farm, brewing beer, and hiking in the forest, and I've never met a happier, more satisfied person in my life. I honestly wouldn't know, as I was not invited, nor was most of the class. The organizers, who also were the yearbook clique back in the day, sent out a few invites on Facebook, which I don't have, and relied on word of mouth. From what I heard, no one that I still talk to went, or even knew about it. Turns out, only 50 of about 300 people actually got together. We're a class of 2005. A shame. It would have been interesting. Edit. Unfortunately, this seems to be a popular theme these days. Seeing people over Facebook isn't entirely the same as seeing them in person. So it goes. For the record, my high school is in a suburb of Buffalo, NY. This one guy used to be kind of a bully. Seemed not to give a duck about school. Had bad grades. Skipped class and did some drugs in school. I wasn't bothered by him and didn't interact with the guy that much as I wasn't a target of his antics. If you ask me how I thought he turned out, I would have guessed and was now doing some kind of manual work and had no education. Turns out he co-created one of the most recognizable clothing brand in my country and has multiple brick and mortar locations. His brand is worn by some big names. He's a successful businessman and he's probably worth millions. I think it's pretty ducking cool he turned out that way. Edit. Hints on the brand are in the non-upvoted comments in the thread. It's a good ol' Reddit treasure hunt. One kid was fairly small, quiet and goofy, nice kid, but nothing too special about him. We hung out a few times at speech drama tournaments. I had wondered what happened to him. Turns out he grew quite a lot and became quite popular. His acting career took him far. He's been in several huge films, including X-Men. We knew him as Jimmy. Today he goes by a more mature name of James Marsden. I hope he's still a cool, goofy guy deep down that I remember from the few times we hung out. One of those loner heavy-set kids who used to be in the shadow of everything and never talked to anyone finally showed up being the life of the party. This kid was one you'd have forgotten if you didn't have a class with him, even though we only had a graduating class of about 200. Strangely, he wasn't even at the 5-year reunion. Turns out he on a 3-year-long sailing expedition during the 5-year reunion, stopping at various islands and making friendships with the locals. It must have given him loads of social experience he missed during the high school years. But I guess the late bloomers tend to grow the most. Story after story. This kid was gathering a larger crowd. He got lucky with some stock choices right after high school and became loaded with cash. Spent a lot of the money on various hobbies until he found a love for the sea. Turns out the girl he brought with him was a foreigner from his island travels, and they spent the last year of his expedition sailing back to the US. Many cocktails later, the party started winding down. It was only a few of us left, the old fat kid included. I told him I wanted to travel too, and he told me that he remembered a time I was nice to him in high school. And since he was so wealthy he wanted to repay the favor since I apparently made an impression on him to motivate himself to change his life. I asked him how much it would cost to join him next time he went sailing and he said about $350. It was at that moment I noticed that this guy hadn't lost any weight on his sailing voyage at all. In fact he wasn't even a man. This was a giant crustacean from the Paleolithic era that hadn't even attended our high school. I said I ain't giving you no $350 for a sailing voyage you goddamn Loch Ness monster. Get your own damned money. Lesson of the story really is that you have to be careful with who you're nice to in high school. 10 years from now they could really change your life. The class fatty dropped it all and now looks like Roblo. My friend, who I didn't keep in touch with, left a boy and came back a girl. I think Facebook and social media has killed the need for reunions tbh. This one girl made it from stripper to mayor's wife. It was a small town, so to her that was a big deal. This guy was poor, nice kid, but really poor. Only owned 2 shirts and 1 pair of pants. People always donated clothes to school to give to family. Dirty, needed groomed. Overall looked homeless. You know how most kids are about it. But he was cool. Millionaire. Has started and sold quite a few businesses and is overall very successful. Invests in lots of real estate now. It's surprising how many of the ridiculously smart girls, we had a lot of them, got pregnant not 2 years out of high school, dropped out of university, and now have 2+ kids. No higher education and are totally stuck in their boring ass lives. Some of the slow learners actually made it through uni or vocational school and have bright careers, only because they got their it together. From the guys, beer bellies and bald spots everywhere. Shocking how many went totally out of shape. One guy went from being an arrogant asshole to being a bald arrogant asshole. I went to mine. I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but the assholes were still assholes and most people declined in their looks. No ugly duckling to swan stories, but at least a few people that I simply did not recognize until told who they were because of weight gain. etc. The tone of the evening was set when I walked in with a friend and the first thing out of the organizer's mouth at the sign-in table was "Sorry to hear about your divorce" to my friend. We didn't even have our stupid name tags on yet when this was said. I didn't go to my 15th or 20th yet, I would probably go to my 25th. I cannot imagine a universe in which I'd attend one of my high school reunions. My 20-year reunion was 2 years ago. I didn't particularly like my time in high school, and while I did have some friends, I have kept in touch with some of the ones I would want to. As for the ones I haven't kept in touch with but wouldn't have minded, I'm willing to write that off as an acceptable loss in exchange for not having to suffer through the evening of small talk and bullet from people I didn't really like or know, and probably don't remember. I used to pass notes to a guy in algebra class, mostly song lyrics. I'd write a line, pass it to him. He'd write a line. Back and forth. He was a quiet kid and friends with some other friends of mine who were big into BMX bikes and skateboards. I took a bunch of photos of these guys for my photography class. At graduation he said he was heading to California to ride BMX. He never came to a reunion. He was too busy playing rhythm guitar in Guns N' Roses as Izzy Stradlin. 2 died. 1 became disabled after a car accident. Couple of them came out as gay. 1 became a super successful entrepreneur and heaps got really fat. Meanwhile, I got a haircut. I didn't go to mine, but I have to share my story. For some reason the popular kids were the ones in charge of planning it and they invited all of their friends but no one else. Then they posted pictures of the reunion which was really just a HS popular kid get together. Me, like a lot of others, never got an invite or anything, but because of FB we saw it happened. A dude that I saw drop acid in class on multiple occasions had become a youth preacher. The girl voted best looking had become a chain smoking drunk who had somehow aged 30 years in a decade. The goth girl that I would sometimes smoke weed and talk about John Waters movies with had become some kind of Stepford wife. A lot of people seemed genuinely shocked that I hadn't been stabbed to death in a back alley somewhere. Never realized I had such a reputation in high school. 2 guys died in Vietnam. Their absence was only noticed by me. Just sad. One of my classmates showed up with boobs and a V. I graduated from an all-guys high school. I can't wait for my 10th year. In 5 years, I was the fat awkward loner girl who thought she was cool. So far I've lost 40 pounds and plan to keep going. I don't wear makeup but I will get it done by a professional for my reunion. No one will recognize me and it will be great. And I will feel great because they will probably all look like crap. At least some, hopefully. And I will finally look better than the people who tease me. I am also not planning on having any kids, so that's always another one up. Edit. Sorry this sounded super hateful. I didn't mean for it to be that bad. To rephrase, I want to look better in general to what I was back then and maybe turn a few heads. Do I want a couple people to seem worse off than me? Not necessarily. They might be better people now. If so, then good on them. But, on the other hand, if they aren't and they are still the manipulative jerks they were to me, then yes. Yes, I do. As for the kid thing, some people are meant to have kids. Some aren't. Kids are not for my lifestyle. But some people just have kids because they are supposed to and it does not fit them. These are the people I am referring to and I will feel bad for them. TLDR. I want to better myself before my reunion as a prize for me, and if it elicits positive response I'll be all the happier. Some of my high school peers were jerks to me because I was different. The end. One girl I went to high school with is now a guy I went to high school with. It's an all-girls school. Tough, badass football player with shaved head, nicknamed Iceman, came to the reunion as skinny, long-haired hippie yogi and sporting one of the happiest smiles I've ever seen. I like to think he finally figured out who he really was. I expect a lot of the super popular guy that ducked my crush is now fat and bald, as is usual with threads like this. There was a girl in my high school class who was near the top for GPA, was going to a prestigious 4-year for pre-med, and was the ASB class president. 10 years later I found out she was an overweight hairdresser and had a kid out of wedlock in the itty city nearest our hometown. Talk about a transformation. So mine was last year. Saw a lot of people who got really fat, a few people who looked the same, some who got really good looking. Met my fiance there. I'm glad I went. One of the ugliest girls in our class looked like a mom in high school, a little on the chunky side with a short afro. She was a white Puerto Rican I think. Anyway, She came to the reunion as a body double for Monica Lewinsky. Not a single person recognized her without looking at her name tag. The transformation as to how pretty she was compared to how ugly she was in high school was mind-blowing. Everyone had a kid or two and almost everyone had at least one failed marriage. They all looked fat and sad and their faces lacked color. It was really depressing. Most were just angry with life and bitter. I left rather quickly and went to hang out with my current group of friends. TL. Doctor, the youthful happy faces of the people I knew had turned fat, grey and sad. My husband and I went to the same high school but met years later. He was the football player all the girls wanted in bed and all the guys wanted to be with. I was the one people threw against lockers and treated like trash. When my reunion came around, one of the girls I had kept in contact with asked me to help with the website. So I said what the hell. When we showed up, quite a few people asked why he was there. He had graduated 2 years earlier. He said he was with his wife and Justin took his seat. I walked in and took a seat as they were thanking those who helped with the reunion. When they announced my name, people looked around slightly confused. I stood like the others and you could hear a pin drop. Apparently I changed quite a bit in that 10 years. My husband raised his glass and smiled again. It was awesome. There was a girl in my class who was not comfortable in her body. She acted like a boy, talked like a boy, and always wanted to do boy things. She got made fun of a lot. Meanly, kids are assholes. I went to elementary through 12th with her, so I knew her for a long time. I'd call her my friend, mostly because we were always nice to each other. But we never saw each other out of school. 10 year comes and now he's living life as a man. Not everyone from my podunk little school saw this as a good thing. Mostly the ones who still live in our hometown. But most of us were happy for him. He's on Facebook now. My 10 year was just as Facebook was spilling into the masses. And is confident and is a regular person. Comfortable in his skin. Just living life. I saw me go from being a daily smoked out stoner who breezed through each year of high school with average grades to a middle school science teacher who last year received Teacher of the Year honors. I bet they never saw that coming. Itches. Sorta the opposite at my 20-year reunion. John said, well, I still have the same job I started in high school at the same place. Still live in the same house. Painted the gutters though. Slightly off topic because I didn't go to my 10 year, but by not going, I started a rumor about myself being a rally driver who was recruiting for his team. The team I was recruiting for was the Mongol Rally, which is by no means a professional race team nor an actual race by any real standard. But 5 or 6 people messaged me on Facebook asking if I needed someone who helped manage the team or do some other know nothing do nothing collect paycheck job. None of them wanted to drive to Mongolia with me, Everyone was the same for the most part. None of the cheerleaders got fat. The nerdy kids were still nerdy. I guess I was probably the biggest change since the dress code for dinner was to wear a suit and I was literally the only one there in a suit. Despite my rather gangster roots in high school, one of the hotter cheerleaders' husband was wearing shorts and flip-flops. I don't know what the duck is wrong with people. You just duck in Google semi-formal and it says wear a goddamn suit, jeans, shorts, polos. No, every site says wear a suit. Duck. 3 fave memories from my 10th. 1. The super smart, but unmotivated class clown, sitting at the bar telling everyone that he worked for a NASA subcontractor as a human space waste engineer and everyone believing him. It freezes instantly in space. Completely hilarious. Her actually worked in a lumber yard. 2. The most beautiful, popular girl in our class sitting on a bench with literally, I kid you not, a line of guys waiting to talk to her and tell her how well they were each doing. She was still as gorgeous and perfect as ever. 3. The fact that educational and occupational attainment really didn't matter at all. It was high school cliques all over again. That changed at the 20th. But the 10th was still very much high schoolish. If you are trying to finish a degree or get a promotion before you go to your 10th reunion, relax, no one cares. But if it's your 20th and you care about such things, hurry. The fat gay guy became really fit, ripped, and successful. God damn it. Fat Tim, why you be so brilliant? Mega obese quiet kid, so huge everyone just exempted him from cruel remarks etc. Lost hundreds of pounds and also ended up being fabulously gay. Showed up with his sassy little boyfriend. I was so happy for him. My 10-year was a year ago. The organizers were these 4 girls who just happened to have all gotten married in the last year, which I personally thought was funny. However, the person who had the biggest change, one person who was a girl in my grade, had a 6 change over the last 10 years. He was on the lookout to avoid an ex-boyfriend, because it would be awkward. Another big change was one of the women in my year who was almost a bull in terms of body size when I was in school, slimmed down a lot. Other than that, the people that showed up were pretty what I expected. I was on the lookout to avoid an ex of mine that I had gotten back together with after college but broken up with a few years earlier. Luckily she didn't show up. This lady I went to high school with invented post-it notes. She really impressed at the reunion. For some reason nearly everyone I knew from high school is on LinkedIn, so I can see what they're up to. So probably there won't be any big surprises. Friends come in and out of your life like busboys in a restaurant. I heard that Vern got married out of high school, had 4 kids and is now the forklift operator at the Arsenal lumber yard. Teddy tried several times to get into the army but his eyes and his ear kept him out. The last I heard, he'd spent some time in jail. He was now doing odd jobs around Castle Rock. Chris did get out. He enrolled in the college courses with me, and although it was hard he gutted it out like he always did. He went on to college and eventually became a lawyer. Last week he entered a fast food restaurant. Just ahead of him, 2 men got into an argument. One of them pulled a knife. Chris, who would always make the best piece, tried to break it up. He was stabbed in the throat. He died almost instantly. Although I haven't seen him in more than 10 years, I know I'll miss him forever. I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus. Does anybody? Will report back next year. I'm assuming it'll be meh. HS reunion. Hey, screw that noise. I didn't go to 10 and don't plan on 15, 20, but if I did actually go, I'd probably be a pretty big contender for most transformed. I was that tall blonde chick that doesn't talk to anybody. I had an all black, all the time stint too. I was in all the AP science, math, and English classes. Straight A student, honor society, etc. My physics teacher thought I'd really go somewhere in the science field. Lots of potential. Bullet. Anyway, now, I'm much more open and have an obnoxiously loud dark humor. I'm no longer tall as I'm in a wheelchair, ATV accident, spinal cord injury, and I'm an artist at a video game company. Life is ducking crazy. All the invisible boys were hot, well dressed, and gainfully employed. Probably myself. Sometime during my early 20s, social interaction just clicked and I somehow managed to change myself from nerdy, socially miscalibrated, unintentionally funny guy to a person that people actually want to befriend, invite, walk with, duck. Sounds a bit preposterous. I know, it's a strange mixture of practice, self-evaluation and somewhat holistic self-improvement, and finally acquiring some social credit or value I could build upon. Edit. Reason behind this post is, if I could do this, you can do this too. This girl, let's call her Jane, was always very quiet. She was never picked on, but that's because she was mostly ignored. She wrote lots of poetry and read lots of books, and I never heard her talk in school outside of English class. She started smoking cigarettes and drinking when she was a teen, but she didn't like parties with lots of people. The few times I talked to her, it was always about how terrible parents were, or how terrible God is, or how terrible the government is. She was thin and pretty too, and my friend dated her briefly, but he said he couldn't deal with her anger. Flash forward, I see her again. She put on a ton of weight, like a ton. I thought, oh great, now she has body issues on top of her other issues. Poor girl. But I talked to her and she was so happy. She got a job writing for a travel blog and she gets to go all over the country. She came out as a lesbian and I saw pictures of her and her partner's travels. She quit drinking and she's been sober for a few years now. She's very open about her struggles with her identity, alcohol, and depression that date all the way back to high school. So physical and mental state, she had a huge transformation. And I'm glad she found a happy ending. The few friends I had in high school are still my friends, 45 years later. As for the rest, I might be a tiny bit curious to see who succeeded and who didn't. Otherwise, I don't give a nano rat's ass. It's the past. I live in the present. Monica got hot. Goddamn it.